Yunwu stood before the last working quantum transmitter on his dying world and watched the gray death spread across the city below. The massive crystal device hummed with energy as it sent another desperate message into the void of space. He had been sending the same plea for help every day for 3 months now, and still no answer came back from the galaxy. The Villani scientist was tall and thin like all his people, with skin so pale it was almost see-through. His large silver eyes reflected the dim light of the emergency power systems that kept the research facility running. Outside the reinforced windows, the beautiful crystal spires of his home city were turning gray and crumbling to dust. The Devourers were winning, and soon there would be nothing left of the Villani civilization that had lasted for 10,000 years. The first reports of the Gray Plague had come from the outer colonies 6 months ago. Mining ships found entire settlements turned to ash and dust with no signs of life anywhere. The colonists called it the Silent Death because it made no sound as it consumed everything living. Scientists thought it was some kind of natural disaster at first, but then more worlds started reporting the same thing. Entire planets were going dark one by one. Yunwu had been working at the Central Research Institute when the first infected samples arrived on the homeworld. Under powerful microscopes, the research team discovered tiny creatures smaller than bacteria that seemed to eat living tissue from the inside. They called them Devourers because they consumed everything organic and left only gray powder behind. The creatures multiplied faster than anything the Villani had ever seen, and nothing they tried could stop them. The Villani were a peaceful people who had never known war or violence. Their technology was built for healing and creating, not for fighting or destroying. They had medicine that could cure any disease and tools that could regrow lost limbs, but nothing in their knowledge could fight these alien parasites. The Devourers seemed to be designed specifically to target advanced life forms, and the more complex the organism, the faster they died. When the plague reached the homeworld, the government tried everything they could think of. They quarantined infected areas and tried to burn out the creatures with heat and radiation, but nothing worked. The Devourers just kept spreading and consuming. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled to dust in a matter of days. Billions of Villani died screaming as their bodies turned gray and fell apart. Yunwu had lost his family in the first wave that hit the capital. His mate Su-jin and their 3 children had been visiting the botanical gardens when the plague struck that sector. By the time the emergency teams arrived, there was nothing left but gray ash scattered by the wind. He had wanted to die with them, but the other scientists convinced him that his work was too important. Someone had to keep trying to find a cure, and someone had to keep calling for help. The quantum transmitter was their last hope. It could send messages across the entire galaxy using folded space technology that made communication instant, even across thousands of light years. Every day, Yunwu broadcast the same desperate plea to any civilization that might be listening. He sent technical data about the Devourers and detailed reports about how they spread and what they did to living tissue. He begged for help from anyone who had the knowledge or weapons to fight these creatures. For months, the only responses came from other infected worlds. The Keth Empire had fallen in 2 weeks. The Zorlan Confederacy managed to hold out for a month before their last transmission went silent. The peaceful flower people of Kepler 438b were completely gone now, with their beautiful garden worlds turned into gray wastelands. It seemed like every advanced civilization in the galaxy was dying, and no one had found a way to fight back. The advanced races that might have helped were either dead or hiding. The ancient builders had retreated to their fortress worlds and cut all communication. The machine intelligences had gone into complete isolation and would not answer any calls. The energy beings of the galactic core had simply vanished without explanation. It was as if the entire galaxy was giving up and waiting to die. Today felt different, though, as Yunwu prepared to send another message. The power levels were getting low, and he knew this might be one of the last transmissions before the facility lost all energy. The Gray Death was less than 10 kilometers away now. and spreading faster each day. Soon, it would reach the mountain research station, and then the last of the Volani would be gone forever. He spoke into the transmitter using the common galactic trade language that most spacefaring races understood. His voice was tired and broken, but he kept the message clear and simple. This is the Volani homeworld calling any civilization that can hear this transmission. We are dying from an alien plague that consumes all living matter. The creatures are called devourers, and they turn organic tissue into gray dust. Billions are dead, and our world will fall within days. Please help us if you can. Our people have never hurt anyone, and we only want to live in peace. This may be our final transmission. The message went out into space carried by quantum waves that could cross the galaxy in seconds. Yunwu had sent similar pleas hundreds of times before and expected nothing but silence in return. The galaxy seemed empty of hope and full of death. He turned away from the transmitter to check on the other scientists who were still trying to find a cure, even though they all knew it was hopeless. That was when the communication system made a sound it had never made before. The receiver was picking up an incoming transmission, and not just the automated emergency broadcasts from dying worlds. This was a real response from someone who was still alive and still fighting. Yunwu ran back to the transmitter as fast as his weak legs could carry him and activated the message playback system. The voice that came through the speakers was strange and rough compared to the musical tones of Volani speech. The accent was unfamiliar, and the grammar was simple, but the meaning was perfectly clear. Message received from Volani homeworld. Help is coming. Repeat, help is coming. Earth Defense Coalition responding to distress call. Estimated arrival in 7 standard days. Hold your position and stay alive. We are on our way. Yunwu stared at the transmitter in shock and confusion. Earth was listed in the galactic databases as a primitive world in the outer spiral arm that had barely developed radio technology. Their species was classified as pre-contact and considered too violent and dangerous for inclusion in galactic civilization. How could they possibly help against a threat that had destroyed the most advanced races in the galaxy? But as the Gray Death crept closer to the research station, Yunwu found himself hoping that maybe these primitive humans had something that all the advanced civilizations lacked. Maybe sometimes you needed to be dangerous to fight something truly deadly. Commander Sung-ho looked out at the stars from the bridge of the battleship Soul's Pride and felt the weight of humanity's first contact with alien life pressing down on his shoulders. The massive ship cut through hyperspace toward the Volani, system carrying 12,000 human soldiers and the most advanced technology Earth had ever built. Behind them followed 8 more warships loaded with weapons and equipment that had never been tested in real combat. The message from the dying. Aliens had reached Earth's deep space monitoring station 3 days ago, and within hours, the entire planet was mobilizing for war. Humanity had been watching galactic communications in secret for 50 years, learning about the civilizations that thought Earth was too primitive to notice. They knew about the peaceful Volani and the other races that were dying from this gray plague, and they knew that no one else was going to help. Dr. Hyojin worked in the medical bay, studying the data that the Volani had transmitted about the Devourers. She was Earth's leading expert on alien biology, even though she had never seen a living alien before today. The microscopic creatures in the Volani samples looked like nothing she had ever encountered, but they reminded her of something familiar. They attacked living cells the same way that certain Earth parasites worked, but they were far more aggressive and deadly. Lieutenant Jae-won stood in the armory checking weapons and equipment for the 100th time since they left Earth. His security teams were ready for anything, but no one really knew what they would face when they reached the alien system. The reports described creatures that could consume entire cities in days and turn living beings into gray dust. Every human soldier on the ship was scared, but they were also determined to help beings who had never done anything wrong. Engineer So Young monitored the ship's containment systems from the engineering deck. Her team had built special isolation chambers designed to hold samples of the alien plague without letting it spread to the rest of the ship. Earth's scientists wanted to study these devourers up close, and that meant bringing some of them back alive if possible. The containment units used technology borrowed from biological warfare research that humanity hoped they would never need. The Soul's Pride dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system and immediately detected signs of massive destruction. Entire planets showed no life signs at all, and space debris floated where orbital stations used to be. Long-range sensors picked up refugee ships fleeing from the inner worlds, carrying the last survivors of a civilization that was being eaten alive. Commander Sung-ho ordered his fleet to intercept the refugee vessels and offer assistance. The first alien ship they encountered was barely holding together. Its crystalline hull was cracked and leaking atmosphere while its engines sputtered on, the edge of complete failure. Inside were 50 Villani civilians who had escaped from a colony world just hours before it fell to the Gray Plague. When the human rescue teams boarded their ship, the aliens stared in shock and fear at these strange new beings who had appeared from nowhere. Dr. Haya Jin was part of the first contact team, and she tried to communicate with the Villani refugees using the translation protocols that Earth had developed from monitoring galactic broadcasts. The aliens were tall and graceful, with translucent skin and large silver eyes that seemed to see right through her. They spoke in musical tones that sounded like singing, but their words carried deep sadness and desperation. The Villani told the humans about the horror they had witnessed on their colony world. The Devourers had appeared without warning and started consuming everything organic they touched. Plants withered and died in seconds while animals collapsed as their bodies turned gray and crumbled to dust. The colonists tried to flee, but the plague spread faster than their ships could travel. Only a few vessels managed to escape before their entire world became a lifeless gray wasteland. Lieutenant J. Wan listened to the alien testimonies and felt anger building in his chest. These were peaceful beings who had never hurt anyone, and they were being slaughtered by some kind of biological weapon that showed no mercy. His security teams were already preparing boarding parties to investigate the infected worlds and find out exactly what they were dealing with. The humans had come here to fight, and they were not going to back down, no matter how dangerous the enemy was. Engineer So Young examined the Villani technology and was amazed by how advanced it was in some ways and how limited it was in others. Their ships could travel between stars and their medical equipment could heal almost any injury, but they had no weapons and no experience with warfare. They had built a civilization based on cooperation and peace, which made them completely defenseless against an aggressive biological threat. The refugee ship carried samples of infected tissue that the Villani scientists had collected before their world fell. Dr. Hyojin studied the samples in the containment lab and made her first important discovery about the Devourers. The creatures were definitely artificial and designed specifically to target advanced organic life. They attacked complex cellular structures first and worked their way down to simpler organisms. This was not a natural plague, but a weapon of mass destruction. More refugee ships arrived over the next few hours, each carrying stories of worlds consumed by the Gray Death. The pattern was always the same, with the Devourers appearing suddenly and spreading faster than anyone could react. The aliens had no defense against creatures that turned living beings into ash and dust within minutes of contact. Entire star systems were going dark as the plague spread from world to world. Commander, Sung-ho called a meeting of his senior staff to discuss what they had learned from the refugees. The situation was even worse than Earth's intelligence reports had suggested, with dozens of civilizations already dead or dying. The Villani homeworld was the last major population center still holding out, but even that was expected to fall within days. If humanity was going to help, they needed to act fast, and they needed to be ready for a fight. The strangest thing about the situation was how shocked the aliens were to see humans. According to their databases, Earth was a primitive world that should not have been capable of interstellar travel. They seemed confused and frightened by the appearance of these new beings who carried weapons and talked about fighting the Devourers. The Villani had never met a species that specialized in violence and warfare. Dr. Hye-jin made another disturbing discovery while studying the Devourer samples. The creatures seemed to be programmed to target specific types of biological systems, and they were most effective against the kinds of life that existed on peaceful worlds. Species that had evolved without predators or diseases were completely vulnerable, while organisms that had survived in harsh environments showed more resistance. It was as if someone had designed the perfect weapon to destroy advanced civilizations. The implications were terrifying because it meant the plague was not random, but part of a deliberate attack against spacefaring races. Someone or something wanted to eliminate other civilizations, and they had created the Devourers to do it for them. The question was why they had started with the peaceful species and whether they planned to target more aggressive races like humanity next. Lieutenant Jae-won reported that his security teams were ready to deploy to the Villani homeworld and begin combat operations against the Devourers. The human soldiers were equipped with environmental suits and biological protection gear that should keep them safe from infection. They also carried weapons designed to sterilize large areas using heat and radiation, which might be effective against microscopic targets. Engineer So Young finished her analysis of the containment systems and confirmed that they could safely transport Devourer samples back to Earth for further study. The isolation chambers would prevent any accidental release while allowing scientists to examine the creatures up close. Understanding how the Devourers worked was the key to finding a way to stop them before they consumed the entire galaxy. Commander Sung-ho looked at the tactical display showing the Villani system and made his decision. The Soul's Pride and her escort fleet would proceed directly to the alien homeworld and engage the Devourer plague in direct combat. Humanity had come to help, and they were not going to let an entire civilization die without a fight. For the first time in galactic history, someone was going to punch back against the Grey Death. The human fleet arrived at the Villani homeworld to find a planet half consumed by death. From orbit, Commander Sung-ho could see vast gray zones where once beautiful crystal cities had stood and spreading tendrils of destruction reaching toward the remaining population centers. The largest continent was almost completely dead, with only a few isolated pockets of life still holding out against the advancing plague. Dr. Hye-jin monitored the biological scanners as they descended through the atmosphere toward the mountain research facility, where the distress signals originated. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen, with massive areas showing zero organic life, while the infection zones pulsed with aggressive microscopic activity. The Devourers were not just killing the planet, they were actively consuming it and converting all biological matter into their own twisted ecosystem. The Soul's Pride landed in a safe zone 10 kilometers from the research station and immediately began deploying troops and equipment. Lieutenant Jae-won led the first ground teams out of the landing bays, wearing full environmental protection suits and carrying sterilization equipment. The human soldiers moved carefully through the alien landscape, knowing that a single breach in their protective gear could mean death within minutes. Engineer So Young established a forward command post and began setting up the portable laboratories where they would study captured Devourer samples. The containment units were working perfectly and showed no signs of contamination, but she knew that one mistake could doom the entire human expedition. The Gray Plague had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than Earth, and it would not hesitate to consume them as well. The first thing that shocked the humans was meeting the Villani survivors in person. The aliens were even more fragile and ethereal than the refugees had suggested, with bones like crystal and skin so thin you could see the pale blue blood flowing underneath. They moved like dancers and spoke in voices that sounded like wind chimes, but their large silver eyes held the hollow look of people who had watched their entire world die around them. Yunwu met the human delegation at the research facility entrance and stared in amazement at these strange new beings. The humans were shorter and thicker than Villani, with skin like leather and small dark eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. They carried weapons and armor that looked crude compared to Villani technology, but there was something about them that radiated confidence and determination. These were people who knew how to fight. The Villani scientist led Commander Sung-Ho through the facility, showing him the infected tissue samples and the data they had collected about the Devourers. The microscopic creatures were even more terrifying. Up close, with their ability to consume complex organic molecules and reproduce at an incredible rate. Every sample they studied had been taken at great risk because the plague consumed any living tissue it touched. Dr. Haye-jin examined the Villani research and immediately noticed something important that the aliens had missed. The Devourers seemed to be designed to target specific types of biological systems, and they were most effective against organisms that had evolved in peaceful environments. Species that had never faced serious diseases or predators were completely defenseless, while life forms that had survived harsh conditions showed some resistance. This discovery led to a breakthrough when Dr. Haye-jin tested human blood against devourer samples in the containment lab. The results were amazing and terrifying. At the same time, not only did human blood resist infection, but it actually destroyed the microscopic invaders on contact. The antibodies and immune cells that protected humans from Earth diseases treated the devourers like any other hostile organism and eliminated them completely. The implications were staggering because it meant that humanity was naturally immune to the weapon that had destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations. The same violent evolution that had made humans too dangerous for galactic society had also made them the perfect counter to this biological threat. Every human carried in their blood the cure for a plague that was consuming the galaxy. Lieutenant Jae-won led the first test mission into a lightly infected zone to see how human immunity worked in practice. His squad moved through areas where the gray plague was just beginning to spread and watched in amazement as the devourers seemed to retreat from their presence. Plants that were turning gray and dying suddenly began to recover when the humans came near them. The effect was strongest when humans made direct contact with infected material. Jae-won removed his glove and touched a dying tree with his bare hand, watching as healthy green color spread outward from the point of contact. Within minutes, the entire tree had recovered and was growing new leaves. The devourers were not just being repelled, they were being actively destroyed by human biological systems. Engineer So Young worked with Villani scientists to understand exactly how human immunity functioned against the plague. The process seemed to involve multiple layers of defense, starting with skin that was too tough for the devourers to penetrate easily, and continuing with blood chemistry that was actively hostile. To the microscopic invaders, humans had been shaped by millions of years of biological warfare on a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. The Villani watched the human experiments with growing amazement and hope. These strange, violent beings from a primitive world were doing something that no advanced civilization had been able to accomplish. They were fighting back against the Gray Death and winning. For the first time since the plague began, it looked like there might be a way to save the remaining population centers. Dr. Haye-jin developed a theory about why the devourers were so effective against peaceful species but helpless against humans. The microscopic weapons had been designed to exploit the biological weaknesses of civilizations that had eliminated disease and predators from their worlds. They targeted organisms that had never learned to fight for survival and had no experience with aggressive parasites. Humans were different because Earth had never stopped being a battlefield. Even after developing advanced technology and medicine, humans still faced new diseases and biological threats every year. Their immune systems remained strong and adaptable because they had never had the luxury of living in a perfectly safe environment. The same dangers that made Earth seem primitive had actually kept humanity prepared for threats that more advanced species could not handle. The breakthrough came when Dr. He-Jin successfully synthesized human antibodies in the Vellani laboratory systems. She created a serum that carried the essential elements of human immunity and could be mass-produced using alien technology. The cure for the galaxy-spanning plague was literally flowing in the veins of every human soldier who had come to help. Testing. The serum on infected Vellani tissue produced dramatic results. The Gray Plague retreated immediately when exposed to human antibodies, and healthy cellular activity resumed within minutes. Even tissue that had been partially consumed could be restored if treated quickly enough. The Devourers were revealed to be paper tigers that could only threaten species that had never learned to fight back. Lieutenant Jae-won organized larger expeditions into the infected zones using human soldiers as living shields against the plague. His teams could walk through areas that would kill any Vellani in seconds and begin the process of reclaiming lost territory. The sight of humans moving fearlessly through the gray death zones gave hope to alien survivors who had thought their world was doomed. The Vellani began to understand that they had been saved by the most unlikely heroes imaginable. The species that galactic civilization had dismissed as too violent and primitive for contact was the only one capable of fighting, a threat that had destroyed the most advanced races in the galaxy. The very characteristics that made humans seem dangerous were exactly what was needed to combat the Devourers. Engineer So Young worked around the clock to establish production facilities for the human antibody serum. The Vellani had the technology to synthesize biological compounds at an industrial scale, but they needed human expertise to understand how the immunity process actually worked. The cooperation between the two species was producing results that neither could have achieved alone. Commander Sung-ho coordinated with Yun-woo to plan a planetary-scale counterattack against the plague. They would use human immunity to establish safe zones and then deploy the synthesized serum to reclaim infected areas. For the first time since the Devourers arrived, the defenders were going on the offensive instead of just trying to survive. The most amazing discovery was that human presence seemed to have a protective effect that extended beyond direct contact. Areas where humans had spent time remained resistant to reinfection even after they left. The Devourers appeared to be programmed to avoid regions where they had encountered effective resistance, and they remembered that humans were dangerous. As the human cure began to spread across the dying planet, the Vellani realized that their salvation had come from the most unexpected source. The galaxy's most peaceful civilization had been saved by its most violent, and the irony was not lost on anyone. Sometimes the very traits that made a species seem primitive were exactly what the universe needed. Dr. Hyojin stood in the production facility watching thousands of liters of human antibody serum flow through the synthesis machines. The Vellani technology could mass-produce the cure faster than anyone had thought possible, but they needed to move quickly before the plague spread to other star systems. Intelligence reports showed that Devourer infections were already appearing on worlds throughout the galaxy, and time was running out for billions of innocent beings. Captain Min Seo prepared her squadron of atmospheric fighters for the largest aerial deployment in human history. Each aircraft carried tanks of the antibody serum that would be dropped over infected zones like rain, bringing life back to areas that had been consumed by the Gray Death. The mission would require precision flying through contaminated airspace, where a single equipment failure could mean death for the entire crew. Commander Sung-ho coordinated the planetary assault from the command center that had been established in the Vellani research facility. Tactical displays showed the spread of infection across the homeworld and the slow but steady progress of human forces pushing back the plague. For every square kilometer they reclaimed, 10 more were being consumed, but the tide was finally starting to turn in their favor. Yun-woo worked alongside human scientists to track the source of the Devourer outbreak using quantum sensors that could detect the unique energy signature of the microscopic weapons. The readings led to a disturbing conclusion that the plague was not spreading randomly, but was being directed by an intelligence that understood galactic civilization. Someone was deliberately targeting peaceful species for elimination. The breakthrough came when engineer So Young detected artificial quantum emissions coming from the asteroid belt at the edge of the star system. The signals had the same frequency as the Devourers themselves, which suggested that something was controlling the plague from a hidden location. Long-range scans revealed a massive biological construct that was larger than any known starship, and was actively breeding new waves of the microscopic weapons. Lieutenant J. Wan led a reconnaissance mission to investigate the mysterious object using stealth shuttles equipped with the most advanced sensors that Earth technology could provide. What they found in the asteroid field was unlike anything in the galactic databases. The bioship was a living creature the size of a small moon that pulsed with malevolent intelligence and spawned clouds of devourers from specialized organs along its hull. The discovery changed everything because it proved that the plague was not a natural disaster, but a deliberate attack by an unknown enemy. The bioship was clearly artificial and designed specifically for biological warfare on a galactic scale. Its creators had been systematically eliminating peaceful civilizations and would not stop until every advanced species was extinct. Dr. Hye Jin analyzed samples of the bioship hull material that the reconnaissance team had collected and made a chilling discovery. The creature was ancient beyond imagination and showed signs of having consumed the biological matter of hundreds of different species. This was not just a weapon, but a living monument to genocide that had been operating for thousands of years. Captain Min Seo launched the first wave of serum drops over the largest infected city on the Villani homeworld. Her fighters swept through gray zones that had been lifeless for months and watched as the cure began to take effect. Plants emerged from the ash and dust, while the gray plague retreated like a living thing fleeing from something it could not fight. The sight gave hope to everyone watching from the ground. The aerial campaign continued for days as human aircraft dropped the antibody serum over every infected area on the planet. The cure worked exactly as Dr. Hye Jin had predicted, with the Devourers being destroyed on contact and healthy biological activity resuming almost immediately. Entire cities that had been written off as dead began to show signs of life as the gray plague retreated. Commander Sung Ho received new intelligence from deep space monitoring stations that detected similar bioships moving toward other infected systems. The enemy was not just attacking the Villani, but was coordinating a galaxy-wide campaign of extermination. Earth's intervention had disrupted their plans, and now they were accelerating their timeline to eliminate as many civilizations as possible before humanity could spread the cure. Lieutenant J. Wan prepared his assault teams for a direct attack on the bioship using specially modified spacecraft that could survive in the hostile environment around the living weapon. The mission would be incredibly dangerous because the creature could spawn unlimited numbers of devourers and had defenses that no one understood. But it was the only way to stop the source of the plague and save the rest of the galaxy. The assault force included human soldiers equipped with the most advanced biological protection gear available and weapons designed specifically for fighting microscopic enemies. They would need to penetrate the bioship hull and locate whatever intelligence was controlling the Devourer production process. Intelligence suggested that the creature had a central nervous system that could be targeted and destroyed. Engineer So Young developed new containment protocols that would allow the assault teams to operate inside the bioship without being consumed by the concentrated plague environment. The suits used human immune system components to create a biological shield that could repel devourers while still allowing the soldiers to move and fight effectively. It was untested technology that might not work, but it was their only chance. The attack began with Captain Min Seo leading bombing runs against the bioship exterior using specially modified weapons that could penetrate organic armor. The creature responded by spawning massive clouds of devourers that formed defensive barriers around its hull. The space around the asteroid field became a swirling gray fog of microscopic death that consumed everything it touched. Dr. Hai-Jin monitored the battle from the command center and watched as human fighters pushed through the devourer clouds using their natural immunity to survive exposure that would kill any other species. The biological defenses that had destroyed entire fleets were useless against beings whose blood was actively hostile to the microscopic weapons. Humanity was fighting fire with fire. Lieutenant Jae-won led the boarding assault through breach, points that the bombing runs had created in the bioship hull. His teams fought their way through corridors lined with organic weapons and devourer-spawning pools while following sensor readings toward the creature's central control system. The interior of the ship was like a nightmare vision of biological warfare taken to its ultimate extreme. The enemy revealed itself when the human assault teams reached the bioship's core. The Harsec were an ancient species that had once ruled a galactic empire, but had retreated into isolation when younger civilizations began to challenge their dominance. They had created the Devourers as the perfect weapon to eliminate potential threats while preserving their own superiority through biological engineering. The Harsec themselves were frail and ancient beings who had modified their own biology, so extensively that they were more machine than organic life. They had relied on biological weapons for so long that they had forgotten how to fight directly and were completely unprepared for an enemy that could not be killed by their microscopic arsenal. They had never encountered a species that was naturally immune to their perfect weapons. Lieutenant Jae-won confronted the Harsec commanders in the bioship control center and demanded that they stop the plague immediately. The aliens were shocked to discover that their devourers were useless against humans, and that their carefully planned genocide was being thwarted by a species they had dismissed as too primitive to matter. They had never considered that violence and disease could create resistance. The battle for the bioship was brief and decisive. The Harsec had no defense against direct assault by beings who could ignore their biological weapons, and their ancient technology was no match for human determination and firepower. Within hours, the creature was under human control, and the production of new devourers had been stopped permanently. Commander Sung-ho received the surrender of the surviving Harsec leaders, who realized that their age of dominance was over. They had spent thousands of years eliminating peaceful civilizations, but had never faced an enemy that could fight back effectively. The galaxy would never again be threatened by their biological weapons because humanity now possessed the cure and the knowledge to prevent future outbreaks. The destruction of the bioship sent a signal across the galaxy that the Gray Plague could be defeated. Human fleets were already departing for other infected systems carrying the antibody serum and the knowledge needed to save dying civilizations. For the first time in galactic history, someone had successfully fought back against the Harsec and their weapons of mass destruction. Engineer So Young began the process of converting the captured bioship into a research facility where scientists from across the galaxy could study biological warfare and develop new defenses. The creature that had once been an instrument of genocide would become a center for healing and protection. The ultimate irony was that the enemy's greatest weapon had become humanity's greatest tool for peace. 6 months after the defeat of the Harsec bioship, the Vellani homeworld bloomed with life again. Crystal cities rose from the gray ash while gardens and forests spread across continents that had been lifeless wastelands. The cure had worked beyond anyone's wildest expectations, with the planet not just recovering but actually becoming more vibrant and healthy than it had been before the plague arrived. Dr. Hye-jin stood in the new joint research facility that had been built where the old Vellani Institute once stood. Human and alien scientists worked side by side studying biological threats and developing new medical treatments that combined the best of both civilizations. The partnership was producing breakthrough discoveries almost daily as two very different approaches to science merged into something greater than either could achieve alone. Commander Sung-ho had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Galactic Defense Force that included ships and crews from dozens of species. The organization's primary mission was responding to distress calls from civilizations under threat and ensuring that no one would ever again face extinction alone. Humanity had proven that even the most advanced biological weapons could be defeated by beings willing to fight back. Engineer. So Young supervised the construction of medical stations throughout the galaxy that could synthesize and distribute human antibody serum to any world that needed protection from biological threats. The technology was being shared freely with all civilizations because humanity believed that everyone deserved the right to defend themselves against weapons of mass destruction. The captured HFY bioship had been converted into a mobile research platform that traveled from system to system, studying biological warfare and training local scientists in detection and response protocols. The creature that had once been an instrument of genocide now served as a symbol of hope and cooperation between species that had never worked together before. Lieutenant J. Wan led the new Rapid Response Corps that specialized in providing immediate assistance to civilizations facing biological or technological threats. His teams included human soldiers and alien specialists who could deploy anywhere in the galaxy within days of receiving a distress signal. They had already saved 3 worlds from artificial plagues and stopped 2 attempts by rogue scientists to develop illegal biological weapons. Yun Wu had become the chief liaison between humanity and the galactic community, helping to coordinate joint research projects and diplomatic initiatives. The Villani scientist who had sent the desperate plea for help was now working to ensure that no civilization would ever again face extinction alone. His people had learned that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources. The transformation of galactic civilization was dramatic and far-reaching. Species that had previously avoided contact with each other were now sharing technology and resources to defend against common threats. The old isolation and xenophobia that had characterized interstellar relations was being replaced by cooperation and mutual support, largely due to humanity's example of selfless intervention. Captain Mincio commanded a squadron of mixed human and alien medical ships that traveled the trade routes, providing emergency medical assistance and biological threat response. Her crews had developed new techniques for treating plague victims and had successfully prevented several outbreaks from spreading beyond their initial infection zones. The galaxy was becoming a safer place for all peaceful civilizations. The most significant change was in how different species viewed each other and themselves. The Villani had always believed that their peaceful nature made them superior to more violent civilizations, but they now understood that diversity was essential for survival. Species needed different strengths and capabilities to face the various threats that existed in a dangerous universe. Dr. Hai Jin published her research on biological immunity and warfare in journals throughout the galaxy, sparking a renaissance in medical science as civilizations began to study their own vulnerability to artificial diseases. Many species realized that their focus on eliminating all sources of biological stress had actually made them weaker and more vulnerable to engineered threats. The HFY themselves were undergoing a dramatic transformation as they were forced to confront the consequences of their genocidal campaign. The surviving members of their species were working with galactic authorities to identify and neutralize remaining biological weapons while contributing their extensive knowledge of genetic engineering to peaceful research projects. Earth had become the unofficial center of galactic biological research as scientists from hundreds of worlds came to study human immunity and learn about biological warfare defense. The planet that had once been dismissed as too primitive for contact was now hosting the most advanced medical conferences in known space. Engineer So Young established training programs that taught alien engineers how to build and maintain biological containment systems using technology adapted from human bioweapons research. The skills that humanity had developed for fighting wars on Earth were being transformed into tools for protecting peace throughout the galaxy. The new galactic order was based on the principle that every civilization had something valuable to contribute regardless of how primitive or advanced they appeared to others. Humanity had demonstrated that traits which seemed negative or dangerous could actually be essential for survival when the right crisis emerged. Lieutenant J1 received reports of new threats emerging in distant parts of the galaxy, including rogue artificial intelligences and energy-based weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. The Rapid Response Corps was preparing to investigate these new dangers and develop countermeasures before they could spread and threaten peaceful civilizations. Admiral Sung Ho addressed the Galactic Council about the importance of maintaining diversity among spacefaring species. His speech emphasized that homogenization was a form of weakness because it eliminated the different approaches and capabilities that were needed to face unknown threats. The galaxy was stronger when it included both peaceful and warrior species. The economic impact of the new cooperation was enormous as trade routes reopened between systems that had been isolated by fear of biological contamination. Species that had hidden in fortress worlds emerged to participate in galactic commerce again, knowing that they were protected by the new defense networks and medical protocols. Dr. Hyejin announced the discovery of natural biological defenses in several other species that had previously been considered vulnerable to artificial plagues. The research into human immunity had led to a better understanding of how all biological systems could resist engineered threats, and many civilizations were stronger than they had realized. Yunwu reflected on the irony that his people's salvation had come from the species they had been taught to fear. The violent humans who carried weapons and fought wars had turned out to be the galaxy's greatest protectors and most generous allies. The Villani had learned to see strength and compassion as compatible rather than contradictory traits. The greatest lesson of the Devourer crisis was that no species could survive alone in a universe full of unknown threats. Cooperation and mutual support were not just moral imperatives, but practical necessities for long-term survival. The galaxy needed both peaceful civilizations to preserve knowledge and culture and warrior species to fight threats that could not be reasoned with. Engineer. So Young completed the construction of the first interspecies research vessel designed to explore unknown regions of space and investigate potential threats before they could spread to populated systems. The ship combined human military technology with alien scientific equipment, creating a mobile laboratory that could handle any biological or technological danger. As new distress signals arrived from distant galaxies, humanity prepared to answer, them all with the same determination that had saved the Villani. They had learned that being the galaxy's protectors was not a burden but a privilege, and they would never again ignore a cry for help from beings who had nowhere else to turn. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of species willing to help each other when the need arose. Humanity had shown that even the most unlikely heroes could make a difference, and that sometimes the traits that made you seem dangerous were exactly what the galaxy needed most. Peace was not the absence of violence, but the presence of beings willing to fight for those who could not fight for themselves.